audio called the 2192, and I tried to convince them to do a multi-channel, but they didn't want to do it. So in my studio, I got 5 2192s, and I had 8 tracks of 2192, and the rest Digi 192, and I put the primary tracks on the 2192s and the secondary tracks on the Digi 192s, but my dream was to have them all on the 2192s, the good sounding converters. So when I was at UA, I did a ton of research on A to D, D to A conversion, and basically it breaks down to the analog sections in all these typical A to D, D to A converters are very cheap. They're the same analog section that's in like a Mackie mixer or any other budget piece of analog electronics. And things like a Neve mic pre or a Manley mic pre or compressor uses high-end audiophile electronics. So if you spend a lot of money on a nice microphone and a nice mic pre and a nice compressor, and then you put it through a Digi 192, it's as if you're just putting it through a Mackie at that point. So you're taking this wonderful sound from this microphone and this mic pre, and then you're just destroying it going through a Digi 192 or your typical converter. Whereas with analog tape, Studer took a lot of time and took pride in the analog electronics, so that's why a lot of people still prefer tape. But as we know, it's tough. It's like an old car. You have to keep maintaining them, and you just get tired of it. And with the time constraints of the studio, you just don't have, a lot of people just don't have time to deal with tape. So the mothership was our dream in the studio, my personal dream, not to sell it to all you good people, but for me. This is what I wanted for me. So let me just go through some of the issues. I got a little cheat sheet here just to remind me. But the typical things that you hear with a bad A to D, D to A converter versus tape is that it's harsh and grainy, there's no depth, there's a lack of warmth, and it's hazy in the middle. You might not even realize that because you're so used to hearing it, that's just what you're used to, and you're fighting it the whole time. Why doesn't this sound like the guitar in the room? You know, the guitar sounds full and big, and you go into the other room and it's like small, like it's coming out of a little AM radio, and you're constantly trying to make it bigger. Well, it breaks down to basically most A to D, D to A converters use off-the-shelf integrated circuit op amps. It's a little circuit that does all the analog section, but when you buy a Neve or a Manley or something like that, it's discrete components. It's a big circuit with big components, big transformers, big tubes, big transistors. So what we did is what I did is I took that same approach to A to D conversion, took those great analog sections and put it into the converter because it's analog to digital. So the analog section is every bit as important as the digital section. The other thing that is working against most converters is because there's multiple units, they all are running off of word clock. And the worst thing you can do is run a converter off an external clock, because inside there's a thing called a phase lock loop. So it doesn't matter how good your initial clock source is, this phase lock loop modulates the signal slightly and again blurs the signal. So the mothership, because we can get all the channels into one unit, it runs off of one clock crystal, an internal clock. So what does that do for you? It basically, the mothership and all of our circuits have discrete transistor circuits that run in class A. What that means is that with typical circuits are class A, B. So class A means that there's no crossover distortion. With class AB, there's always crossover distortion. What that means is every time the wave hits the center point, there's a little bit of distortion right there, because one transistor is working on the positive part of the signal and one on the negative. But with all Burl circuits, it's the same transistor throughout, so you don't have crossover distortion. Crossover distortion destroys the mid-range, especially vocals and horns, and that's why I want people to listen to the horns. It also destroys the stereo spread. So when you heard that signal, you probably heard it go from this with the Digi 192s to this with the Burl. That's Class A. That's basically what it does. It just makes everything clear, especially vocals. We didn't have a vocal track there, but vocals are the things that I specialize in, and the vocal tracks with Class A are far superior than anything through Class A B.